My Mickey, my moon to me, the vibe just go with me. Everybody wanna play while they on the play. Everywhere everybody better want to play. Better read that way, the vibe. Better 55 to 5 fans from the rain. If my mom is about cold again, if you have with me, if you want to play, never he got love with the breath. We can let it on. Come on, get a legend.
Hi, JC.
Hey, Amanda.
Hi, we're doing take 3 of episode 1.
That's right.
It's taken us a little while to get here.
Yeah.
But our listeners don't know that. That's okay. Hi, listeners. Thanks for listening to our very first episode of Cannalachia.
That's right.
We're excited.
It's been interesting. We've had a little construction here and there.
We have.
Yeah.
But we found our space, and there's no construction, and it's lovely.
That's right.
And now we can officially have a first episode.
That's right. I'm so excited.
Me too. So this is Cannalachia that you guys are listening to. This is our brand new podcast, and we're going to talk about all things cannabis, cuisine, and chords, aka music, from right here in the heart of Appalachia. And I say heart of Appalachia, we're actually in Lexington, Kentucky, which is central Kentucky, but you grew up in Appalachia. My family's originally from Appalachia, from parts of Virginia, West Virginia.
I kind of grew up at the foothill,
Gotcha.
right there, like that entrance space between the mountains and kind of central Kentucky. But I got a lot of friends and folks that I care deeply about in Appalachia. And of course, Appalachia runs pretty far out, but we're going to start here in the Commonwealth. And who knows who we're going to talk to.
And
I mean,
I hiked the Appalachian Trail when I was 12
Oh, see, that's
for 2.5 weeks,
That's cool.
right?
I haven't done that. I'm a little envious.
But we did way up. I mean, I was doing Maine and New Hampshire. But yeah,
That's very cool.
I did that. That was fun. But anyway, yeah, I'm excited. So we're going to spend, 1 hour a week with you guys talking about all these things, interviewing some rad people from around the area, from the general regional area here in Kentucky. And we'll spread our wings as we move forward in the show. But for now, we're talking mostly to Lexington locals, and we have chefs and musicians.
We got a couple folks. We got Rachel Crow. She
Mm-hmm.
kind of reigns kind of at the Red River Gorge area is her home. And
She's an incredible blues musician, if you haven't heard.
we got Clark Kissick from back in my home area, back in Bath County. And he's going to be on the show and talk about a little bit of his past and his history and experience with cannabis and his music. So that's going to be really cool as well.
And more than anything, we just want to get out there. We really want to normalize the use of cannabis, whether it's recreational, good on you if you do, or if it's you're more medicinal like me now. I started out like most teenagers, where I smoked almost every day.
I can feel that.
And now I'm 42, and I use it to help my insomnia and my lady troubles when it's crampalicious time.
Well, it works.
It does work.
I mean, as far as I know, I don't have that issue. I'm midlife crisis. I might have menopause or something.
Let's put it this way. I read an article about CBD tampons today and got very excited. I know that's not a conversation. But I was like, those are coming. Those are going to be a thing. I want some. But yeah, so.
Well, and using it kind of recreationally and playing around with it when we were younger, that's one thing. But to now be in your early 40s and I like to think, I don't know, people probably feel it in their 30s, but I'm starting to feel life in my 40s. And, I use it or began using it really when I was recreationally using it younger is when I really discovered it was helping with like anxiety and stuff. And, there is a correlation between the mind and the gut. And when we think about like IBS and things in the gut, it could be something that stems from the gut, or it could be something that stems from something psychological or anxiety that then messes with the gut. So for my personal use, it's really or not personal use, but for medicinal use, it's mostly used for anxiety and to calm the body or for inflammation, those sort of things.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's a fantastic plant, natural plant that has a lot of fun uses and then also a lot of medicinal uses,
And then just outside of that, we live in a world where it seems like everything is being perpetually divided somehow. And I think we're now coming into an age where we need to start coming and sitting at the same table. And if we're going to talk about this plant, I think, we need to discuss, the whole fiber also not issues, but the hemp and how it can be used with fibers and textiles and stuff. And we know that, and that's a part of our history. And I feel like, one of the issues with expanding on that is because we've always had the issue with the word marijuana in the country, due to taxation and control and those sort of things. And that's kept us from really expanding on that, I believe.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, no, I don't think a lot of people realize, and I didn't really realize what significant a role hemp played in the founding of this country's government. I want to be careful how I, talk about
Right.
the history of America and that it wasn't just an empty continent before
Right.
Europeans got here. But when they did come here and cultivated the land, the biggest crop that they were sending back for financial means for the industry of the country was hemp. That it was being delivered from the seeds were coming from Spain. And so it was a big part in the founding of this country.
And then we get into the 1800s, and that kind of trickles down Appalachia and gets into here. And then we had like some revivals around the First World War, and those sort of things were happening.
In the 1850s, we start to see the first sort of medicinal uses for it. O'Shaughnessy? I
Yes,
believe?
yeah, he was an Irishman, I do believe, and that goes all the way back. And if some of the literature I have at home, I think he did some traveling through India and different places, and that's really something to take into account. That's not talked about a lot.
Yeah. And so it's just this is a crop that has played a huge part of American history in the development of this nation. That all of a sudden in the 1930s we start to see this prohibition come up, this sort of resurgence, I think, of this puritanical mindset where we have prohibition of alcohol, we have prohibition of marijuana, and the Marijuana Tax Act in 1937, and then really just an overall, criminalization of this plant.
And there's lots of theories that was occurring also because of control of an industrial age coming and those sort of things. And there was hemp is it's a great fiber, and it can do a lot of things. This plant has a lot to offer.
Yeah.
And I personally believe, and I've said this many times talking to people out and about, I believe this plant, the whole family of this plant, really is a saving grace for not only our Commonwealth but our nation.
I'd be interested to look into because one thing I haven't done is I know it's curious to me at that time is because I think that's when we also start industrializing our food, right? So industrialization of hog farms and cattle farms and chicken farms, and we start to see that happening more and more around that time period. And I know that there was a big push from the government for farmers to start growing corn and feed for the livestock. And so I wonder what part, I haven't looked into the history, but it makes me wonder what part of, no, we need corn, so let's criminalize hemp.
Well, and then
make it more difficult.
There
to
was a
grow.
period in there throughout history where things like imported jute and stuff like that was affecting the growth of fiber hemp here as well. But that is very interesting, and I think as we go along in this podcast series and we interview some folks, and we will definitely start sharing links and things with people, and really expand on a lot of those topics.
Because there was a time here in Kentucky where hemp was the number one crop, period. And we also have to look at big tobacco and how did big tobacco play a part in
that's exactly right.
in the criminalization and removal of hemp farms. Because it's a bummer, man. Because like you said, we can make clothes out of it, we can make flooring out of it, build houses from it, we can smoke it, we can eat it.
And we've even seen in the cannabis industry as a whole over the years, as things are starting to shift, we kind of find that it's almost like in some areas that you have this battle between the hemp folks and the marijuana folks. But I would really like to see this as the whole family of cannabis coming together.
Yeah.
That could really like just bring us all together as as brothers and sisters in this nation in a way.
Absolutely.
We have the ability to create new jobs and opportunities and tax income. And what I would like to see is, if we're going to have true cannabis legislation, and we're going to have, I know we're going to kind of talk about some new stuff, but there are, states already that are funneling some dollars from their medical and recreational cannabis programs to help people in need. But, we could also use some of that money, because I know some of those states have had a surplus. And I think, how could we use that money for, there's engineers somewhere in this country that has a degree, that doesn't have the right job, that's paying enough to pay off the student loans. Well, fiber hemp, there's a lot of labor in it, which creates some issues and hurdles for us. Well, here, let's invest some of that money back from marijuana, the flower side, into the fiber and seed, and let's help to generate new programs, new educational programs. Let's help people to maybe offset their student loans, because we need an engineer to help develop a piece of equipment that we need in the agricultural area. There are so many things that we could do here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we're now at the point of recording this podcast, we are now at 38 states
Yes.
that have either decriminalized completely or have some sort of legislation on the books in regards to legalizing cannabis for medicinal purposes or what have you. So yeah, we just got 12 to go, and Kentucky is technically counted in one of those 38 because they're in the process of trying to figure out these new laws
Yes.
that have been voted on.
Last session, our legislative body voted to pass medical cannabis. If I think it's 10 or 12 conditions. I could be wrong. Don't quote me verbatim on that. But I know that they're working on expanding that. My personal opinion, we know what they're like, but I do believe at the end of the day, we should not be using legislative or executive power to decide on who we think is worthy or what condition. We should leave that between the practitioner and the patient.
Yes.
But however, I'm going to give dibs to the folks that have, after this can's been kicked down the road per se for over a decade, that we have finally, we're moving forward here in the Commonwealth to help those in need. And I hope that gets expanded. And I hope that I hope that we have discussion and dialect with medical professionals and people outside from both Eastern and Western philosophy to be able to expand on that, because there's so much anecdotal evidence out there from the West Coast, from California, from different places throughout the world. And we know it's helpful for people.
Yeah, there's medical research going back to, I've read articles from the 40s and 50s, especially during the reefer madness scare and all of that. But these medical, research papers that, explicitly state that cannabis is not harmful, does not cause violence or psychosis or anything of that nature that they were trying to, put out in these propaganda films to scare parents.
And sadly, over the years when those things started to happen in reefer madness, we created this storyline and almost an indoctrination that has trickled down even to today. And that is starting, I believe, to kind of fade out, because now we're in a period where we've got great grandparents and grandchildren and children who are sitting around talking about it. We've got, parents and grandparents who are dealing with rheumatoid arthritis and all these conditions, and their grandchildren are like, hey, I got something for you.
And we're going to have people on our show in future episodes where you'll meet that they were teetotalers up until they were in their late 30s, early 40s, didn't touch a drop of alcohol, didn't touch any kind of can, nothing like that, and are now daily users because of its medical benefits. And it's really interesting to me to it takes all kinds.
It does. It does. And I think we're also going to have a lot of conversation between people in the industry. There's been a lot of discussion on isomers and extracts and different things from the farm bill when it comes to hemp. Everyone's now starting, outside of CBD and THC, these major cannabinoids that we all hear about. But now we're looking at things like Delta 8, and you're hearing about, the expansion on Delta 9 in ways, and then 10 and HHC and this and that and the other. And, there are a lot of differences of opinion on that.
Right.
And I have opinions that we can discuss with other people as that comes along. I think though there is a reason. I think there are people who need access, and that's the only way they can get it in a way to certain cannabinoids here in Kentucky for now.
Sure, but I also, I'm a big proponent of just full on recreational,
Right.
I, let's legislate it the way we do alcohol.
Right. Well, I agree with you there. I think a lot of the arguments on that in the industry is like how safe is things like Delta 8 and stuff because of the manufacturing. And I understand that. I think when we're starting to look at things, we need to look at how are things being tested, and if you're going to purchase a product, do your due diligence and look for testing results so you know that
Yeah,
you got a good
I
product.
mean that's why in California, I'm originally from California. We'll get into that in a minute, but yeah, we have very strict regulations. In fact, I just read last week that specific brand of vape had to be was recalled and taken off the market after further third-party testing because of pesticides that were used in the growing of that particular crop. So there are ways to regulate it because, of course, like with anything, there's danger. That recall alfalfa sprouts a couple weeks
Right,
ago.
right. And why, in my healing journey in this period in time, I'm trying to do things as natural as possible and that sort of thing. It's probably my greatest vice is a Coca-Cola, but I want one of those each day, and I try not to. But when we're talking about those other products, there are some people who believe that those shouldn't be on the market, and I don't necessarily that I fully agree with that. I think if the testing shows that this is a clean product, I think we should leave that up to people to decide if that's for them. Because if we're going to say that, it's kind of almost like, well, why don't we start questioning a lot of the artificial flavoring that we put into ingredients? That's where I'm kind of going with that.
And maybe I mean, if I'm not going to go on too long of a tangent over here, but when you go over to Europe and you go grocery shopping, they'll have the same food on the you have to go to the American grocery store, which is what I think it's literally called, but they'll have Kraft mac and cheese, but over there the ingredients listed on the back are notably different. It's the same price as over here, pretty much, I think, for the most part, but there's no dyes in it. They don't allow in Europe. So if they can regulate, if we can, let's go ahead. Was my
Right,
point.
right.
Was I'm not scared. Let's go ahead and regulate food better and in a healthier way.
Well, and over the
And
years,
it's fine. I'm not a libertarian. Regulate my food.
well, it's I think that we need some what I like to call simply refined regulations. I think we get to where it gets so chaotic. The left and right hand don't know what's going on. People don't even understand what they're eating because they cannot understand what's on the label,
Exactly.
and they're blinded from it. And I think that's a real I mean, seriously, if you're a listener and you don't know, go and look at the products sold in Europe and here and look at the label. You're going to find that interesting. And it's not that I'm like or as we were speaking, that we're like downing the industry, but these are things that need to be discussed because having worked kind of in with the hemp industry over the past few years and hearing the talk and how we've had different guidelines and everything's changing and hounding for COAs and which is a certificate of analysis. I have no problem with testing a product whatsoever. I want to know that what I'm using is good and safe. But we also go about our business in this country purchasing foods and over-the-counter medications and things. And who's asking at the register, can I get a certificate of analysis on
Yeah.
these things? And it's not that I'm going against that. I'm just saying this brings up a good question to everything, and I'm glad you brought that up because I think we should begin questioning the process of how our food's grown in this country, how it's treated, and then how it's marketed.
Yeah. But so my point in all of that though was like let's do the same with and let it be. It's fun. Here's my thing, and I'm actually gonna get into my bit of so every week, listeners, we're gonna do Canner News. And you'll get the rest of that sound effect later. But I just want to, so there was a thought on that. Oh, so of course, let it be state by state, county by county, as far as sales are concerned, and that's fine if you want to say, oh, in this state, 21 plus, 18 plus, and what in this county is dry. I mean, we live in Kentucky. We live in bourbon country,
Yeah.
literally, and there are counties that are dry counties.
I don't know the exact number now. I think it's probably.
It's less and less.
I
And
think
now
it's
they're-
on one hand now.
Forgive me, listeners, but this is officially what they call them, moist counties.
Yes.
Which I believe means you can buy beer and wine, but not liquor. So, and you can't buy liquor on Sundays. So but that's my point. So, regular, okay, fine. We can't buy weed on Sundays, and, you got to be 21, and you can't do it, in Bourbon County. Fine. But I think what we need in this country is a sweeping federal decriminalization that does allow for interstate travel.
Oh, I agree 100%. I think, though, I like the idea, and I know that we're seeing throughout our country, like local municipalities and stuff passing legislation, or not really legislation, but rules or guidelines or decriminalization of cannabis in their areas. I think where we get, though, as we're doing that, I'm not against it, is then we create this issue for things like law enforcement, and that gets tricky, I think, and I think that's something we have to really think about, because like when we think about counties, and then it's like, okay, then somebody's going to go to that county and then they're going to go home. It gets real tricky, I think.
But it doesn't, because that's what I'm saying about alcohol. If I don't have living in this isn't Celebration Disney, right? So where your car gets checked when you go in. This is a situation where if I live in Berea, which is now a moist county. I'm sorry. That's what they call it.
Is it really moist?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make certain.
There's wet counties, dry counties, and moist means that you can't buy liquor, you can buy beer and wine. But if I live in Berea, I can come over into Fayette County and I can buy all the bourbon I want and I can bring it home to my house. It doesn't mean that the city of Berea police can pull me over and arrest me because I've brought bourbon into Berea.
I get what you're saying.
So that's the same thing. Like, regulate sales. That's fine. When it's sold in your camp, fine. Regulate, it can't be, obviously, don't sell it near elementary schools, like it's all, come on.
Well, and I think that
Come on, people.
right, and I think that kind of goes back to what I was saying. Is I'm not against regulations. I think they just need to be simplified and easily understood, and basically managed in a way.
I mean, even now, so California, which was the first state to decriminalize for medical reasons in 1996, and then have taken further steps up until it took from 1996, I think, until 2000. I want to say in 12. I could be wrong. Is when it became, so that was in 2000, I think 12, 11, something. Anyway, that's when we actually started having dispensaries where a regular person could go into a dispensary and make a purchase, but you had to be 21, you had to be a citizen of the state. It was all these rules. I worked in a couple dispensaries back when I lived in California. Now it's very different because it's fully recreational, but when you go in, you still have to show ID. They put all your info into their computer system, and it's still is, the sales are very much still regulated. But where the federal government and this hesitation to decriminalize on a federal level, what's happening because of that now is it's very hard for businesses to get loans. It's very hard for businesses to be able to use your average credit card terminals, because the banks don't want to deal with banks don't want to deal with cannabis because it's still criminal on a federal level. And then it's harder to grow, because most people, when they grow a crop, they're going to actually lease land. They're not going to go and buy a whole farm. That doesn't happen very often, is my understanding. I don't know. I'm not a farmer, but my understanding is that most of the time what's happening is that cannabis, growers are leasing farmland. But if that farmland is already being subsidized by the federal government for whatever crop the farmer's growing, the hemp and cannabis growers cannot use that land because it's federally subsidized land. So we're just hurting all these. We can't have companies that exist in California, Colorado, Illinois, Massachusetts have to have separate corporation headquarters in each of those states because it's because they can't drive their product through from state to state.
Well, and it's interesting that you bring that up because when I like to sit and dream about this plant and the ideas that have either been discussed with me over the years or that I've discussed with folks or where my mind goes, is I start to think about things like how can cannabis be like a secondary beneficial crop for agriculture for farmers who are already growing another product. And one of the things in the hemp industry you'll hear a lot and in agriculture is a value added product. How do we add extra value to it? And so, when you start to look at how cannabis is raised for the different purposes, obviously they are raised very differently. You're growing for fiber, seed, or flower. It's very different. But there, when I start to think about the flower part of that, I think, if we had true cannabis legislation and then we could build markets almost, some of the people, when I mention this comes from a lot of the folks that's been fighting for hemp regulations here in the Commonwealth. The conversations I've had with them is they had envisioned a system that worked kind of like tobacco in a way, where you had a market, you went to a marketplace, there was a grading system, people come in for purchasing. And I thought, what a wonderful idea if we had that ability to where a farmer, like, say, had a small greenhouse or high tunnel where they were growing for flower. And if they were growing for more of a high CBD kind of fall in the hemp flower market, that's one thing. But right now, if a farmer's growing flower in the hemp industry and it gets over a certain amount of THC, they are required to destroy that. And to me, that is a waste of time, money, energy, and resources to where that could have went into the cannabis industry for some purpose.
Yeah, no, it's dum-dums.
And right. I mean, it's something to think about.
Bureaucratic dum-dums. It's the Vulgans. The Vulgans are making decisions about. That's my conspiracy theory, and I'm sticking to it.
Well,
The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is real, and the Vulgans are controlling our planet.
but I just think on top of that, if we got through that and we had the ability to put some of the funding that came from a little bit of taxation or program fees or whatever back into, like fiber and stuff. We talk about how for years we've used pesticides and all of these things. Over the years we had farmers calling some of the manufacturers and people trying to sell flower hemp that they could not sell because it had pesticides in it. And they're like, well, we didn't put any pesticides on it. Have you raised tobacco on your farm in the past? Well, yeah. Well, were so many pesticides and things that have been used over the years, and they stay in the soil. And so we have that issue across this country. And I think to myself, we have a big push for electric vehicles right now. And our current governor here has worked with a company to bring in an actual battery plant for, if I'm not mistaken, Ford vehicles. It's like the first largest battery plant for, I don't know if it's just Ford or for any other car, but I think to myself, I have read articles out of Europe how fiber hemp was used to create carbon to make batteries. And I think, okay, well, how about we have a stimulus package for agriculture for farmers to be able to grow fiber hemp to clean up the soil because it helps to pull toxins. It cleans the air, pulls toxins out of the soil. And then rather than putting that into something we might wear, let's condition that into carbon and turn it into the batteries that go into the new electric vehicles. If we're going to be green, let's really be green.
Let's do it.
Well, I would like to call out.
I
like to call out the CEO of Ford if anyone knows how to get in touch with them because, here's a great idea. Put some American money there, and let's say, Henry Ford. There is a history of hemp with Henry Ford. And I think to myself, why don't you be the first American car manufacturer to see to it that you put create hemp product in that car? And then maybe people would come back and say, well, we just don't really have the resources in this country to make that happen.
And we can have a whole hemp car like Cheech and Chong.
Well, old Henry was working on that, and I just think about, we may not have everything we need to do that right now in this nation, but I feel like we have the ability to stimulate the funding to do it.
And we
cannabis.
do. I mean, we can make plastics out of hemp. We can make bricks out of hemp. Not all of these are super efficient right now. The process of, hemp bricks fascinated me. I was thinking about actually building a house out of it, and then when it was explained to me just how the process is really not at a place of commercialization yet. But I'd be excited to see, let's come on, engineers, CEOs, Elon, Bezos,
Yeah.
don't stop being supervillains. Stop trying to be, what's his name? Um, oh man, really? Superman, Lex Luthor.
Oh, okay.
Jeff Bezos needs to stop trying to be Lex Luthor over here with his weird shit and going outer space, and he needs to start investing in hemp.
Well, I mean, we've seen that Elon he consumes cannabis. I mean, he has shown that he
Elon
consumes,
does.
and so why not put some of that money into that type of research? And
Yeah.
I think if we could stimulate that somehow, so that the funds, a little bit of the taxation from medical and recreational cannabis went back to the education, to developing the technology that we need to expand on this. This to me is we're. I mean, it really is a moment that could change history for our nation and our world.
It could. So let's get on it,
Well,
people.
yeah, let's do it.
But I want to know a little bit about who are we to sit here and to ask listeners to listen to us talk about cannabis amongst ourselves and with our guests. So tell me a little bit about your backstory and where you are now. All of us, me, everybody's listening.
Well, it's really interesting because cannabis. Okay, so I grew up just east of Lexington. There's actually two counties that I kind of consider home. I got family friends there. Started school in one, and ended up pretty much spending my youth in the other, and that's Bath and Montgomery County. I was pretty much raised by my grandparents in Bath County, and as I was growing up, I suffered with a lot of anxiety and a lot of things. And when I was a teenager and using cannabis recreationally, I realized that when I was using it, I had these moments that was like, oh, so this is what it feels like to be a little calmer, to be able to think a little differently, or the quote unquote, what I thought was normal. And I realized that some of the pharmaceuticals that I had been put on that were giving me side effects or, weight gain, weight loss, all these different things that, oh, maybe this helps better than that. And actually, for quite a while in my later teens, early 20s, I consumed cannabis pretty regularly. And at that time, I lived a better life, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Probably some of the greatest mistakes I ever made in my life were in times when I wasn't using cannabis. And I believe that we can abuse anything in this life, but cannabis played a role in those ages. I'm not going to lie, recreationally I used it and had some fun, but there was times that I used it throughout the day in what I would now call microdosing. That was very beneficial. And then over time, I would talk with folks about cannabis, and then I started reading about all the things that hemp could do. Kind of got into maybe a little hacky sacking and stuff like that, if we want to talk about it. But
Are you sad that somewhere there's a hack not being sackied right now?
well, it's
A
probably
sack not being hacked. What? I can't even say it right.
Well, so, but
Tried to-
I had products back then that I kind of got into the hemp jewelry and all these things, and I thought, this can make a lot of things. And, it's not just that. And then over the years, I was fortunate enough to get to meet Gatewood Galbraith. And that's a name if you're not from Kentucky. If you are from Kentucky, I can't imagine you don't know who Gatewood Galbraith is. But Gatewood Galbraith was what most people said was a man before his time. And I believe that. And he gave me a copy of his book many years ago. And I found out later, starting to get, and I'll get into that story, getting into the hemp industry, that many of the people who started hemp businesses or in that industry of cannabis, they also have a copy of that book or got to know Gatewood. So shout out to Gatewood. I'm sorry that he's not physically with us in this current time, but I know spiritually he's somewhere seeing what's happening. But that was really my thing. Is over the years it became even I became even more passionate about it. And I ended up going to school for massage therapy. I do have a little background in some psychology studies, and healthcare administration. I tend to lean a little bit more on Eastern philosophy side of things than the Western philosophy, but I truly believe in integrative health. I think we need to start bringing that again. Everything needs to come sitting at the same table. And during my time while I was in massage school, my fiance and a friend was making natural body products because we were starting to become very conscious about what we wanted to put on our bodies. And they had crafted this body butter, and I was like, this stuff would be great as a massage medium. And at the time, I was using full spectrum extract, CBD, uh, uh, in between use of cannabis, I'm not going to lie, to help with anxiety and those sort of things. And I was also using a lot of essential oils, and there's terpenes in cannabis, and we'll get into that later, and hopefully bring in a guest to really get into the nitty gritty of that. But when we start looking at essential oils from plants, there are terpenes and lots of different components that bring a lot of medicinal benefit. And I was blending those with my full spectrum extract to kind of quote unquote replicate certain strains of marijuana, and I was using that topically on my knees and my joints. And at the time I was working, I was doing clinicals, I was in class, and I'm not getting any younger. And so I was like, let me put this on. And so it was like, whoa. And we started doing this with family and some friends, and they're like, what are you doing? What is this? So I went to her and I was like, she's a biologist, by the way, and I was like, can you put this in that body butter? And she's like, yeah, I think I can do that. So she did. We started using it with some friends and family, and they were like, you got to make a product. And that's really how we have a company called Ancient Aromas. It's like what I'm
Nice.
right here. And we now have a full line of products that everything from lip balms to massage oils. And those are used topically, and they're not really there to get anyone high or anything, but they do serve a purpose in lowering things like inflammation, pain, general aches and pains, those sort of things. And a lot of people have benefited from it, and I'm grateful for that. I will tell you that in that journey, you were talking earlier about, like in California, credit card usage and all of these different things that people in the cannabis industry have dealt with. Well, the hemp industry has not been any easier. I mean, it's still defined as cannabis.
Right.
And I know that Congress has been working on a Safe Banking Act. It hasn't really moved in the ways we'd like it to, but it's just been super difficult for people in the industry. You're talking higher interest rates, you're talking being blacklisted from payment processing all the way down to a personal level if you had any interest in these companies. It's almost like someone once said, if you're in this industry, you must have like a good backbone, because it's been difficult. Every corner of everything that you try to do in that industry, whether you're working with cannabis as medical cannabis or fiber in the hemp area, it has been like from banking to insurance to whatever. Everything has been twice, if not thrice as hard as any other business that you could have. And that's one of the things that I've experienced working in the industry, and tons of what I call my brothers and sisters in the industry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so that actually brings us to, I'm going to go ahead and do the, now hear this in Canada News. That's my telegram sound, by the way.
Okay.
For our listeners. Yeah.
I kind of like that. We need to record it. Have a little button.
I don't have a sound effect button like they do at fancy old radio stations, so I just have to make my own sounds. It's fine. But in my news this week that I read that was really fascinating is there are, I think it's 10 pretty major businesses out of Massachusetts that are all coming together with a obviously a great big law firm, and they're actually suing the United States Attorney General specifically to remove this Controlled Substances Act and the Marijuana Taxation Act, and to have those removed from the books, have cannabis decriminalized and re-registered on how federal legislation looks at cannabis, and put it in with the same as tobacco and alcohol, because of everything you're stating, because of how harmful federal regulation has been to legitimate businesses, where these businesses are legitimized by the states in which they are created, and then delegitimized by the federal government. and we continue to see these things happen. We are now dealing in Alabama, similar but different. There was an actual pharmacy in Alabama, Georgia. I'm sorry, Georgia, where Georgia has now, they're moving on their regulation of cannabis and decriminalization and having it be able to be sold medicinally. And there were a handful of pharmacies that were going to look at into selling cannabis because just a little bit of my backs. When I was young and I actually first started using medicinally, I would go pick it up from my doctor in California, the way the regulation was then. But at any rate, the DEA has stepped in to these pharmacies in Georgia and said, no, no, you can't sell. So it's very interesting to me that it's been decriminalized on what we are calling a medicinal level. They're going to allow dispensaries to sell it, but an actual pharmacy can't, because the other things that the pharmacy sells are regulated by the DEA, and because cannabis falls under the Controlled Substances Act, it cannot be sold alongside other pharmaceuticals. And that's just fucking stupid.
Lots of questions there. Lots of questions.
It's so stupid. And just because we know, like we were talking about earlier, the medical research into cannabis, from ailments ranging from PTSD, and we're going to talk to some veterans and about that and their usage of it. So my backstory, and I can get into it, is I grew up very different from you.
Yes.
I was born on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. Mama was a hippie. Daddy was a rock star. I grew up on tour. I think most of the people who are probably listening to this episode already know that my dad was Meatloaf, the singer, actor, entertainer.
You have to remind everyone though about his name, about what he could.
That was a terrible. Was that supposed to be sad because Dad died? Like, that was a very weird sound effect. My dad was Meatloaf.
I was actually going. Wait.
Oh, okay. That one makes a little more sense. What just happened? So for those listeners that don't know, my dad was Meatloaf, so I grew up touring the world with him, and then when I was in my later high school years, we moved to Los Angeles and lived there. I lived there for 20 years along with my family till I moved to Kentucky about 6 years ago. But so I think it was in 1996 that California had passed medicinal laws. We didn't have dispensaries yet, but in 98 or 90, I was 17 or 18, I got diagnosed with IBS and lacerated ulcers in my intestine. And my doctor, my family physician at the time, was like, look, everybody already knows you smoke pot, Amanda. I was like, yeah. And he's like, why don't you just come get it from me from now on? And you can be a part of this study, because they were at the time trying to figure out what, could this be a helpful, not a cure for IBS, because there really isn't a cure, but could this be a helpful medication for that? Yes, it is. And so now I'm 42. I don't use cannabis I don't think I knew, by the way, like, so as an adult, in my late 20s, I was diagnosed with PTSD, probably a little ADHD, maybe a touch of the tism. I'm not sure. It's hard when you have all of the mental things going on at once. And I don't think I've stuck with a therapist long enough to really get everything down. I just travel too much, pick up and move. But PTSD is definitely a thing, and anxiety issues, absolutely. And so I don't think I realized as a teenager that in my using was sort of helping me with those things. I don't think I've really realized until at around 36, I pretty much quit drinking. I might have a cocktail with dinner or at a party. I might use marijuana recreation. We went to Vegas. We got married. Our second stop after the the this civil hall. What is it called? The place where you go to get your license.
The county clerk,
County
yeah.
clerk, yeah. So when our first stop after we got out of the airport, county clerk, got our marriage license. Second stop, dispensary. That's how we started our wedding weekend. And so yeah, so I still my point in all that, still use recreationally on occasion, but now and having stopped using for so long, I can really tell the difference when I know my dosage and I use according to my dosage, which depending on the ailment is anywhere between 15 to 20 milligrams. Um, it how much it helps with either my cramps or my IBS if I'm having a flare up or my insomnia. So it's just an interesting thing there that that's my usage, and I've been a big proponent because at 17, 18, when you have IBS, it can be really debilitating, embarrassing, like try being an 18-year-old at a party and then all of a sudden you have to go like find a bathroom, it's fucking sucks, man.
Well, it's interesting that you're talking, earlier when I said I think that it should be left up between practitioners and patients.
Yeah.
You're talking about how anxiety and stuff, and back then maybe you didn't know what those things were, or there are actually, I have witnessed and heard, like here in Kentucky in the Commonwealth, in Frankfurt, there are legislators who believe that, oh, people, that shouldn't be a qualifying condition. There are some medical professionals that say, oh, that's really not a thing. We shouldn't do that. Mental health is an extremely important topic that we should not overlook.
Absolutely.
And I believe you can abuse anything, but the thing as to why it should be, or in my opinion, should be between practitioners and patients is a lot of times, we don't know if there is a physical ailment that is causing some of the mental health issues, or like kind of the brain gut, the whole axis,
Right.
that correlation there, or is it a psychological thing that's going to eventually turn into some physical elements as well? And that's why I think I appreciate the hard work of the people who have lobbied here in Frankfurt and all of that, but we have got to get to a place where that is left between the practitioner and the patient, because no legislative body can give a diagnosis for this person, this person in that county, and say, oh, you're worthy of it, you're worthy, you're not worthy, whatever. That to me is just
No,
completely
it should be on an
asinine.
individual basis, just like any other medication. Absolutely.
Right. And you're talking about your recreational use. I do periodically use it recreationally, not as often. We are in the bourbon capital of the world. I don't have a problem with that. I like a good whiff or sip of bourbon every once in a while. Currently, I'm kind of taking a little break from alcohol, just to kind of. I'm just in this period of like physically and spiritually trying to heal from some things, and I've just took a little break from it. And I think
Mindful drinking is what is my the TikTokers, the children's on the TikToks tell me it's
That it's-
called mindful drinking.
okay, well, I've missed that one, so thanks for sharing that one with me. So maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's mindful drinking. But when it comes to cannabis, the majority of the times that I use it, I'm either using a high CBD kind of full spectrum extract, or I'm using a cannabis product with higher THC here and there recreationally. But really, I feel like this conversation has happened with a lot of friends that all use of cannabis at some point is medicinal at some point. I mean, we
Yeah.
can recreationally choose to use it. And, there's been arguments too here in Kentucky about, should people be able to smoke it, as a medicine? Because there's people that have argued, oh, it should just be in capsule, it should just be in oil. But here's the deal: there are certain conditions in things like psychological, like anxiety, like PTSD and traumas, where if a deep case of anxiety or something's happening, the quickest way, and I'm not saying that, I'm just saying that smoking is the best way to do it, but to inhale it and get it directly into the bloodstream is one of the quickest ways to treat
Yeah.
something. And again, I think that should go back to practitioner and patient, and let them decide.
But
you
have
know.
you ever snorted it? No, I'm just kidding.
Oh gosh. Well, and that's a scary thing to really mention because we won't get into the full story. I'm certain at some point with a guest we're going to talk about that. But Eastern Kentucky and Appalachia was one of the hearts of the whole opioid
Right.
crisis, and I think cannabis could also play a role in healing some of that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me to go into like usage these days, um, if I laugh too hard or sneeze too hard, I pee a little bit. I think there's a lot of women out there that can relate to me. And so I really can't because the smoking makes me cough. So where I used to rip 6-foot bongs off ladders and fall off of them, we can share some of those stories in the future. Now I'm pretty strictly edible. My husband has tried every which way. He's bought all kinds of finagled, chiller from I can't remember the company. Raw.
Freeze pipe.
Right, but it was from Raw, right? From Raw.
No, it's the company is freeze pipe.
Oh, okay. The company's freeze pipe, which was great. I dug the concept of it. It has like the freezer jet like you have in like ice packs and stuff, but it's inside the glass, and so
Okay.
you freeze it.
I haven't seen that, but I'm going to check it
It's
out.
rad. It would be great, but it didn't. It also didn't work for me. So I'm an edibles
Okay.
girl, and also because of the nature of, I think it also helps. I'm guessing that with the cramps, probably if I went back to smoking, that would be a little bit of a faster lead time. Although, again, with the cramps, I'm going to go back to I want some THC tampons. I'm pretty sure that Whoopi's company actually has THC suppositories. Also, right? What? No, I think it's Whoopi because Whoopi made a line of female forward THC products, and I believe that's one of them. But I've never got my hands, and they're really expensive from what I've seen. But at any rate, yeah, I like to cook with it. I like my gummies. But here's my thing. So we can get. I don't know about my listeners at home, but like my one kind of like disappointment when I do travel and I'm in Colorado or Vegas or LA, and I go to the dispensary, all of the goodies that you can buy, the edibles you can buy, are all like sugar forward. So it's all gummies and chocolates and sodas. Can a girl just get some THC Doritos, please? Anyone? That's what I would like some THC nachos. Um, I'm just saying.
Well,
I don't know. I feel like there's a reason for like why there aren't more like snacky foods, but I want some snacky foods.
Well, and I think, and over time there are people who are working on things like quote unquote water soluble and those sort of things. Naturally,
Yeah,
the cannabinoids are kind of fat soluble, but I'm thinking maybe you could put it in a cheese dip
but when
for your
I-
nachos.
maybe.
I think the cheese dip would be good because the fats in that, or like a heavy cream base for something. I'm not saying that is. Are we going for a more like? Are we doing more of a good foods, whole foods, like wholesome, less
No.
sugar kind of thing
No, it's
for our
not.
cannabis?
It's just because I don't.
or
I'm tired of like
just eating the candies and stuff.
eating sweet.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you want a potato chip. Sometimes you want a nacho.
So you're maybe some more savory.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
all. I mean, I don't need it to be fancy and organic and because it's still at the end of the day, it's just weed. Um, but I do, yeah. Let's get some salty snack foods out there. You hear me, cannabis?
And let's name
companies?
that brand "Don't Be Salty."
There
But
we
it,
go.
well,
Sometimes I'm salty. Well, we'll work on this.
yeah, we'll work on it. It just I don't know. I don't know where it came from, But I could see that, and I think again there's been a lot of regulations. I know when you're in Vegas and places like that it's a little bit different, but if we could work on this, the expansion just right there, like I know there are places where there are some really high-end chefs and people who are working in, and we're going to have a guest soon who opened up Cannabis here in Lexington, Annie
Yes.
Rouse, and she has recently been doing kind of a a coursed meal session with a Michelin chef, and she'll talk about that a little bit. And that's been something that they've been doing, and that really just expands. And then I know you invited Trish Tungate, and
Yes, Trish Tungay from Minglewood is going to come on the show. She's going to talk to us. And she was a big proponent in getting CBD additives, I believe, into cocktails at her bar and her restaurant.
And again, that goes back to some misunderstandings or regulations and things that need to change, so that in all of these industries, there can be an expansion of this plant can be used in its extracts. And I mean, how great would that be to be able to, call up and make a reservation to take your friends out and for a really nice, relaxed evening of cannabis. And you know what? Maybe that opens up a whole new Uber service for like Canacar.
I just smiled weirdly at my husband because we're getting, in a few weeks here, we're getting ready to go back to LA for New Year's Eve and my brother-in-law's 60th birthday. And we're going to go to the first ever cannabis restaurant in the country.
That's pretty awesome.
Because even in Colorado, well, it's been over a year. I still don't believe Colorado has legislation on that yet, on actually serving cannabis. And Vegas, certainly, they were also working on something, but more of like a cigar bar kind of vibe, but for cannabis. But this is an actual restaurant, and I'm very excited for it.
I can't wait to hear about it.
Because that's my favorite. So a few years ago for my birthday, my last birthday pre-COVID, I hosted a very small, intimate dinner party, and everybody got each course that we did, and I think we did 5 or 6 courses. You got a choice between whether you wanted it medicated or not, and we did just good home, we did shrimp and grits, but I did it with a chimichurri that, I had a medicated chimichurri and one that was not. I think so here's, if you're thinking about hosting a medicated dinner for yourself and your friends, the greatest thing about it is that by 9 o'clock, everybody wanted to go home.
It's time to chill out.
It was not that you didn't have that I threw a house party and now it's 3 a.m. and I just want to go to bed, and there's that one guy who's now wearing nothing but his underwear and won't stop dancing. That just me. That's, just my house parties. Okay. Anyway, you don't have that when you have a cannabis dinner. Just at 9 o'clock, everyone's like, "Cool, thanks, guys. That was delicious. I have to go now," because the world is a cartoon. Sometimes it's the uncomfortable planet, and that's okay.
Well, and I think that goes back to, I believe that cannabis is an introspective substance. I think that it's one of those things that, I know that we'll get into that with some of our guests too in that conversation. But, I see it as if you're sitting around the table with some friends and you've consumed cannabis, I think, we could probably save the world.
Yeah.
That's where some of the greatest, I think that goes back to the dosage, and we've talked about know your dosage.
Know your dosage, and we're I don't know that we have time to talk about missing your dosage stories. I have quite a few of them, even just recently, as for Vegas, Don't take 40 milligrams, 50 milligrams, and then go where the children are. If you're anything like me, who is intentionally a child-free adult, meaning that I do not have children of my own, I thought that everywhere in Vegas was adult world. Turns out that's not true. There are some places that do encourage families and do encourage adults to bring their children, and I took too much, and the children frightened me. All of the children knew that I was high, and they were all judging me.
Yeah, no, it's like know the dosage and that dosage. Where are you and who's surrounding you with that dosage? Because had a friend, and this has been several years ago, but she likes to make brownies, and she gave us one, and she was like, and at the time, I hadn't been using a lot of edibles, and of course edibles have to pass through the GI tract and second pass through the liver, so it can kick in a little while later after you actually consume it. And so I eat she's like, take a quarter or so, a half or whatever, and I eat this little bit of it. And I mean, I don't know why. I mean, she didn't know how many milligrams. She didn't tell me how many was in there, so I don't know.
And that we'll keep going with this
and
story.
It was just like we were getting ready to leave, and I wasn't driving, but like all of a sudden I was like, why is she mad at me? Like, we got to go home. Like, something's not right, you know? And then we get on the road and I'm like, is everything going to be okay? Like, are we getting pulled over? Like, let's just go home, you know? But I don't know what that dosage was, but it was obviously more than I needed at that moment, at that place and time.
Yeah, and when you're cooking at home, it's next to impossible to know your dosage unless you talk directly, unless you are growing your own crop or talk directly to your farmer. You can do your best, but you're still going to. There's going to be a variance, you know. When I buy a bag from my guy, when I get my flour, and they tell me what strain it is that I'm buying, I can do my best to go on Weed Genius or one of these other apps and be like, okay, what is the strain? What's the milligram? But that, depending on the strain that this particular grow and the strain that I have versus what Weed Genius has in their data could be vastly different. So anytime I've made cookies and people are like, oh, what's the dosage? I'm like, it could be 10, could be 30.
Right. Well, and you know, one of the things I think of is if you had, you know, legal dispensaries, you know, there are certificate of analysis that you can see, you know, what is the
Yeah,
specific,
no, when you
and there is a math equation, but you know, I think this is a great point because at some point we could actually give an equation on our website on how to do it, but
Yes.
you got to know where you're starting from. And I like how you're doing it, but one of the things that I've mentioned to someone in the industry that works in laboratory, the testing of it, is that if we could ever get to the point where we could actually offer a service, like if we get to the point where people are allowed to home grow, or we, you know, regulate this so people can grow a few plants at home, that they have the ability to come in and use that service like they were a cannabis business and actually have their homegrown stuff tested
Yeah.
so that they know it's safe, and they also know what they're working with if they wanted to make their own
Right.
stuff. So, you know,
Because the math equation, once you have the milligram of the actual plant that you're using, the math equation for figuring out your edibles, while slightly complicated, is fairly easy.
Right.
But it's knowing that initial, you can't solve for X
right.
if you're deriving it from X.
Right.
That don't work that way. So yeah.
And it's kind of like that makes me think about how many people at home's like, you know, I didn't continue with algebra. It's kind of like that meme I see with the little dude that's playing the recorder. And it's like, I'm so glad that we did this in school because I have solved so many of life's problems.
Oh
with
yeah,
that.
no, you should see my husband. I keep pointing to this. I know none of you can see the he, but the he is my husband. Chill. No, he teases because I do when I'm just in general cooking at home. I do get into a little bit of the molecular gastronomy. I'm like, there he is, but he teases me because I'll make, you know, like a cheese sauce using I use sodium citrate, which acts as an emulsifier, so that you don't need flour and butter. You don't need a roux. You just add the sodium citrate and it emulsifies cheese into liquid form, and it stays that way, and you can make your own cheese sauce.
See, that's
It's delicious, but it's all done by measurement, by total weight, and it gets very complicated. So yeah, a lot of times when I'm cooking, my scales start coming out, and he's like, I don't know what science experiment you're doing now.
but it's going to be tasty.
But it's going to be tasty, but I have to do math first and make sure my math is right, because otherwise, meh. But yeah, so I'm very excited about our future episodes, and I want to give a big shout out before we wrap things up. To Chill, who you just saw, who is our producer, camera operator, editor, sound man, but what if the theme song writer. that you'll hear at the start and end
our
of
happy
this.
spoon maker.
And our happy spoon maker. And shout out to Horton, who is also here, who is JC's partner. And
Fiance and
fiance.
co-owner of Ancient Aromas. And
Co-owner of Ancient
she
Aromas.
is the scientist behind it all. She's our household mathematician. I can do math and algebra, but it is totally not what I want to do. So she just is. I mean, to her, that's just like second nature. So she's all about that.
So shout out to both of them who have been here for every episode and will continue to be here for every episode. as we go through this cannabis journey.
Yeah, I'm excited, and I'm really excited, to be doing this with you. And of course, this is not about you and I; it's about really having others to share their experience as well.
Yeah.
And I want folks at home that are listening to really hear other people's stories and maybe see how they might relate to that, or how that this plant really isn't that scary, and that this could be really a great thing for the health, wellness, and the prosperity of each of us individually as well as our nation. And I hope on this journey we'll be able to learn more, that we'll be able to discuss that, and just really bring a good conversation to the table.
I love it.
I do too.
All right. So, for everybody listening at home, please, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and all the other places.
Yes, like and share and tell all your friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, get the word out.
All right. We'll see you next time.
See ya.
Go with me, go with me.
Get it?
Come on, Cannalachia.